Welcome all. Thank you for joining us. I'm pleased to announce that this is our first ever Mindflow webinar. The goal of this is basically to help each and every one of you on and off the field. What better way to have one of our experts speak to all you guys this afternoon. For those of you who don't know about Mindflow, and maybe this is your first introduction, we're basically a virtual mental health resource for student athletes like you all to be able to access licensed clinical psychologists and sports psychology professionals. What can we help and what do we do? We can basically help performance needs. So if you're struggling on the field or you're not pleased with your level of play, we can help you boost that and take that to the next level. We can also help off the field in terms of general mental health concerns and everything in between. We like to think we can handle the whole gamut in terms of any concerns that you might be facing as a student athlete. To speak a little bit about our team, every member of our provider pool, our team, if you will, are former collegiate athletes themselves, or they have a background in specialization in sports. So we hear it all the time that student athletes want to speak to people who understand the unique stressors that they're going through as student athletes. And what better way to address that or check that box than say, I'm a student athlete or I was a student athlete myself. So enough of me touting our team. I think that's a perfect segue into today's speaker, Dr. Carly Hunt. She is a counseling and sports psychologist, and she is one of our providers who is on a day-to-day basis meeting with student athletes on a one-to-one kind of arrangement and meeting with them, helping them on and off the field. So today, Carly will talk just a brief overview, a little bit about staying focused on what you can control, staying present through mindfulness, managing performance anxiety, effective goal setting, and healthy habits. Before we kick things off and I pass it off to her, I shared a Google Doc with all of you in the chat section. So that is a worksheet, if you haven't already received it, that you'll be able to kind of work through during one section of the webinar. So that's one thing. And then one final thing, we'll have a Q&A session at the end of this where you all can chat through the Q&A feature in Zoom just to protect y'all's identity. You don't have to disclose anything. I'll be checking that periodically. And then at the end of today's webinar, we'll go through all those questions. Carly can answer them and we'll be on our way. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and pass it off to Dr. Carly Hunt.
All right. Thank you so much, Anthony. And hello, everyone. It's just such a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm going to just take a minute here to share my screen. Okay. All right. Does that look good, Anthony? Great. All right. Okay. So let's dive in. So so as Anthony mentioned, I'm going to be going over a couple of key topics today, but the title of my talk is Building a Champion's Mindset, Staying Present and Focused on What Matters Most. And so we're going to be going into a few different strategies and concepts that can help you stay present and focused, manage performance anxiety, like Anthony mentioned. But I'm just going to say a bit about me, just so you all know where I'm coming from. So I was a collegiate golfer at Georgetown University, and I also played at the University of Maryland, where I studied kinesiology and then counseling psychology. So I played collegiately myself, as well as did my doctorate in psychology. So I'm a licensed psychologist. So I work with athletes and other folks on mental health concerns, and then I also work with folks on performance enhancement concerns. And probably as folks on the call can relate, oftentimes well-being and performance kind of go hand in hand. So the topics we're going to talk about today, I think, can help you with improving your performance, but also just improving your taking care of your well-being as well. I've worked with athletes and studied sports psychology at a few different institutions, including the Naval Academy and UNC. And I most recently came off of fellowship training at Johns Hopkins, their School of Medicine, working specifically on issues around chronic pain and health psychology. So I also help folks manage injuries and chronic illnesses in the general population, as well as in athletes. So I like to sort of say that I take a holistic view of performance in the sense of thinking about the whole person, physical and mental health, as well as mental training strategies to support performance. So that being said, let's go ahead and dive in. So, and as Anthony mentioned, there's a worksheet that you can click there to pull up the Google document that's going to be something you can fill out as we go along today and take with you to revisit again in the future. And you'll see at the top there that we're going to talk about values actually as a starting place. So, and you might wonder, why are we talking about this? And I'm gonna get into that. But I'm just going to define what values are. These are principles that govern how you act. So values aren't something that you accomplish, like a particular goal, but they guide your choices day to day and help you be the person and player that you want to be. So we all have values that we think are most important in our lives and on the field. So you can see some examples that I've listed below here. So commitment, courage, gratitude and appreciation, maybe being present, maybe happiness and enjoyment. So probably everybody on this call initially got into their sport because they really, really enjoyed it. So that might be really what's most important to you. Resilience. So resilience means being able to bounce back effectively from setbacks. So maybe that's something you really value about yourself. Determination, optimism. So seeing things with the glass half full. Acceptance. So acceptance is huge. So that means being able, that acceptance doesn't mean being passive, but it basically means being open to being uncomfortable, being accepting of the good and the bad, and staying on our own side no matter what happens. So maybe relating to yourself with kindness and compassion, encouragement, belonging, for example. So for a lot of players, feeling that sense of belonging and community on the team is something that really drives them. But we're going to be talking about values because you can always stay true to your values. So as you know, there are all kinds of things that are completely beyond your control as a student athlete, but you can always act in line with your values. And I'm going to talk about why this matters. So again, there are so many things that you can't control, right? Your coach's decisions, how other people finish, et cetera, et cetera. And if you take a values focus to your performance, as well as other things in life off the field, this can help get you out of an outcome focus. So trying to control things in the future, such as an outcome of a particular match, and into a process focus, which means a focus on the present onto what you control. So that's a task that, as you know, athletes face day to day, is how to let go of outcomes, let them take care of themselves, and focus on what they can control and manage different thoughts and feelings that can pop up in competitive situations. So before we dive into this further, I want to spend some time just doing a values exercise. So I invite you to take a look at the worksheet that is in the chat. And I invite you to just do some writing now about your own values as a performer. And so you'll see on the worksheet there's a prompt that you can use. And if you're not able to access the worksheet for whatever reason, I'm going to read the prompt to you all now. So just gently ask yourself to reflect on what you value most about playing your sport. What do you stand for? What really matters to you? Another way to pose this question is, if you look back on your athletic career when you retire from sport, what are some of the top qualities that you'd like to be known for? Or how do you need to think and act to feel the proudest of yourself? So just spend a moment or two with that prompt and just write whatever comes to mind. And so we're going to take a minute or two here just to reflect. Okay, so taking another moment or two here to just wrap up the current thought that you're on. Okay. And so often when I do this exercise with folks, there can be a diversity of values, right? So values, like I mentioned, ranging from maybe sense of community and belonging and being in touch with that, to things like being confident, playing freely, playing aggressively. Those are phrases that I hear a lot from athletes. They want to be able to let go and play in the moment and play freely and have fun without getting worked up about results that are in the future, just to give some examples. So let's talk about aligning actions with values. So all day long, every day, we all do things that keep us in line with our values sometimes. And then we all the time also tend to do things that take us away from our values. So just to give an example from my own life. So I really value being present for my life, for what's unfolding. I have a young kid. I still like to play golf. I really want to be able to be available for those things and soak those things in and enjoy those things. And so getting up in the morning and practicing meditation for 20 minutes helps me do that. It sort of sets me on a good course for the day. Whereas skipping meditation in order to get more stuff done or what have you takes me away from that, right? I'm going to give some sports specific examples. So let's say you value playing to play great. So that might mean that you value courage or self-actualization, right? Being the best that you can be in whatever domain. So actions that are consistent with that are playing aggressive and playing smart. But actions that are not aligned with that are playing careful or believing fear-based thoughts. And I'm going to talk more about that. So all the time, the brain is producing thoughts. And some of those thoughts are kind of fear-based, worry-based thoughts. And some of those thoughts are more confident thoughts. But we can relate to thoughts effectively by not getting caught up in them. And I'm going to talk about how to do that. But coming back to this main concept, actions that are aligned with a value of courage would be playing aggressive, playing freely, right? So let's go over another example. So let's say I value having fun and playing the game that I love. So happiness and enjoyment is what I really value most. So actions that are consistent with that might look like savoring the positive and practicing gratitude for each opportunity there is to play at a high level. Whereas misaligned values and actions might look like beating yourself up after mistakes, right? So the relentless inner critic is going to take you away from your values of fun and enjoyment, whereas pausing and really saying, wow, what a rare opportunity it is to play at this high level. Look at all the work I've done to get myself here and how few people get to do this, right? That's more of a attitude of gratitude, cliche as it is to say, that's going to kind of help you tap into those values of happiness and enjoyment. Okay. So let's talk about a third example. So determination and persistence. So these are common values amongst elite athletes, right? So aligned actions with that would be giving 100% smart effort in practice. So smart effort usually includes practicing as you're going to play, right? Practicing with intention, with purpose. Whereas misaligned values and actions would be not giving your best effort or practicing sort of mindlessly without intention, right? Okay, so just to sort of summarize this concept once again, staying in touch with what your values are, kind of like a compass, can help see you through a variety of difficult situations and help you sort of just assess whether you're acting in ways that support what you really care most about. Okay, and values are a little bit different than goals, but they're really related in important ways, and I'm going to explain that. But sports psychology oftentimes talks about two kinds of goals. So the first type of goals are outcome goals. So that's something like, I want to win X tournament, right? So Outcome goals should be challenging. So they should be something that's challenging, but realistic for you, something you can measure. Whereas process goals are a different category of goals, which refer to the steps that you need to take to maximize your chances of achieving your outcome goals. So these process goals are directly within your control, whereas outcome goals like winning are in the future, right? So in order to develop your mental edge, so to speak, being able to identify and stick to process goals is a really important skill because they keep you in the present. And I'm going to explain more about this, but the other thing about process goals is they help keep you in line with your values. And we're going to unpack that a little bit more. Okay, so you'll see a section on the worksheet on long-term and short-term outcome goals. So it's generally helpful to have some long-term and short-term outcome goals just to reflect on what your hopes are for yourself. But we're not going to spend as much time on those today, just because we want to spend I want to spend more time on process goals. But I am going to allow just a minute or two here for you all to just jot down what comes to mind for you in terms of some long-term and short-term outcome goals that you'd like to have for yourself. Okay, so just take another minute here to wrap up your thoughts at the moment, remembering that you can always come back to this and add to it. Okay. I'm also going to touch on the concept of outcome goals for training. So probably you all are working with your coaches on this, but it's a good habit to develop in the name of concentration and staying focused on what matters most is to set goals for each of your training sessions, right? Like things that you need to do in order to maximize the likelihood of reaching those outcome goals that are in the future, right? So an example could be, let's say like a golfer would be improve short putting confidence or performance, or develop a consistent pre-shot routine, that sort of thing. Really just breaking it down into measurable, smaller chunks of things that you can work on in order to again get to those long-term goals. Okay, but we're not going to dive into that too much in detail, but just something to keep in mind. Okay, but let's just move into process goals for competition, which is where we're going to spend a little more time today. So process goals for competition help keep you in line with your values. So I'm going to give some examples. So let's say you wrote down that you value being present. So a way to act in line with that value is to use some self-talk, which is written on the slide there on the left. I'm going to focus on the process today and let results take care of themselves. And if I do that all day long, I can be proud of myself at the end of this competition, right? Let's say you value enjoyment, so having fun. So today I'm going to savor the positive. I'm going to soak in good moments of success or the beautiful weather or smiles on my teammates' faces. And I'm going to be my own best friend. I'm going to be my most positive, encouraging coach out there all day today, right? So let's say you value playing freely. So your process goal for that day or that match might be, I'm going to play great today, rather than playing to avoid making mistakes. Okay. So let's go through a couple more examples. So let's say I value courage. So a process goal that embodies courage is a willingness to be uncomfortable. And I'm going to talk more about this today. But some self-talk might be, today I'm going to be willing to feel discomfort. I'm going to remember that pressure is a privilege, right? In Arthur Ashe's words, right? Resilience. So again, resilience refers to being able to bounce back effectively from setbacks. So an action in line with that would be to keep positive self-talk and body language all day, no matter what. So no matter how bad things get, you can stand tall, speak positively about yourself and your game, stay neutral or happy after each play or each shot, right? You can do that with your body and with your language. And that's a set of behaviors that we know from sports psychology supports resilience. So belonging. An action consistent with that is to just intentionally appreciate how fun it is to be part of this team today. And that's what I'm going to keep focused on. Okay, so you can see here that there are ways that you can be intentional about staying in line with your values and using strategies to keep yourself in the present and focused on what matters most. Okay, so let's come back to our worksheet. So I invite you to reflect and write. And I actually think the section for this is towards the top of the worksheet under clarifying values. What actions do you tend to take that keep you in line with your values? And what actions tend to take you away from your values? And you can also just go ahead and add here, what could you do more of to help keep yourself in line with what you value most? Okay, so I want to move forward to getting really specific with process goals. So a practical tip is before each competition, ask yourself, what's most important to me about doing this? How can I look back on today's round or match and be proud of myself? And set 1 to 3 process goals. So I'd like to invite everyone to scroll down to the second page of the worksheet, and you'll see some process goals for competition, some examples. So I invite everyone to take a minute now and just look through those examples of process goals, and also reflecting on what you've written so far, and just see if you can generate a couple of process goals that you can imagine using for yourself in future competitions. And I think we have some teams on the call today and some coaches as well. And so I would definitely encourage team members to use these this section on process goals and on actions that are aligned with and not aligned with values as discussion points for teams. So I think it can be helpful to learn from one another, to share, hey, what do I really care about? And what are some process goals that I can focus on to keep me in the present and keep me focused on what matters most? So it's something to keep in mind for future discussion as well. All right, but again, the whole point of process goals and values are to help you manage performance anxiety and other challenging emotions by staying focused on what's within your control. Again, values are like a compass, and help you stay present, letting go of things like outcomes. Okay, so let's dive a little bit more into fear and anxiety versus readiness to compete. So I'm going to go over some conceptual information, and then we're going to do a couple of experiential exercises together. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about your brain. Okay, so here is a picture of your brain sliced down the middle this way. And so I'm going to point out a couple of key areas. So the first area is basically these, what psychologists call lower brain structures. And these are structures in our brain that are very old from an evolutionary perspective. So it's sometimes called the reptilian brain. So you can think of other members of the animal kingdom that have been around for a long time. And this part of the brain is really concerned with very basic things, namely survival. So these structures in the brain are often attributed to things like fear and related behaviors. So you may have heard fight, flight, or freeze, right? Is basically like if you can picture a tiger in the woods, this part of the brain is very quick. It comes online when it's scanning the environment and it's saying like, oh man, are there threats out there? How should I deal with them? Like maybe I should fight that threat. Maybe I should become angry. Maybe I should freeze. I should just tense up. Or maybe I should flee. I should just run in the absolute opposite direction. So we carry this part of our brain with us all the time, obviously, from situations that maybe could be dangerous to sport environments where we're not really under threat at all whatsoever. Yet our brain can sometimes look at a competitive situation and think, oh my goodness, maybe my life is at stake here. And so we can start to get a very, very big stress and anxiety response. That's much more intense than what we need. Like we don't really need to, fight for our survival at a tennis match, for example. But it's only natural that our brain cares most about our survival. So it's better to like over calculate threats than under calculate, right? So it has this tendency to kind of overreact to things, so to speak. But fortunately, we have, oh shoot, my animations did not work for me. But basically, we also have, if you look to the left of the lower brain structures to the front, the frontal lobe, so this is the front of the brain here in the front, is sometimes called the more evolved brain. So humans have a much more developed frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe is where we do things like reasoning, where we can access mindfulness. So being able to be present, being able to say like, oh, I'm not really under threat right now, that sort of thing. So we're going to do some practices to kind of bring this frontal lobe online and just work with this general tendency to have fear and anxiety in competitive situations, which is different than just readiness to compete. So of course you wouldn't play well or perform well if you were half asleep, right? So you want to feel ready, but not overly anxious where you feel like you're freaking out, right? Oh, now it is working. Okay, so there's the frontal lobe. Sorry, everybody. Okay, so now let's move forward. So a key implication of that information that I'd like everybody to take away is just how helpful something called reappraisal can be. So reappraisal is a jargony psychology term for experiencing things, but then interpreting them in ways that are helpful. So for example, I'll use a golf example because I was a golfer. So let's say I'm over the ball and I'm so anxious that my hands are shaking. And I might say, oh my God, my hands are shaking. I'm going to blow it. Or I might say, oh, my hands are shaking. Silly brain. That's okay. I can putt with shaky hands. And you can. That's actually a quote from the famous golf psychologist, Bob Rotella, right? But the point is that it's more important how we react or interpret what's going on than what's actually happening or our first reaction to something. So let's dive into another example. So just a very simple practice that I like to teach people involves some self-talk and some relaxation. So let's say you notice yourself, your heart's racing, you're feeling extremely anxious, it's starting to feel like it's getting really, really intense. Rather than fight against that fear and be like, go away, fear, or like, oh my gosh, this fear means, I'm going to blow it. Just simply note to the fear, well, thank you, fear, for trying to protect me. You're just trying to protect me right now. Maybe you're thinking that there's a tiger out there in the woods, but I'm okay. This is a game. This is not a threat to my survival. This is something I love to do. I've got this. And then after offering that to yourself, just simply pause and breathe. We can all do this together. So let's all take a big inhale, breathing into the abdomen, letting it expand. And then slowly exhaling, almost like you're breathing out through a straw. Let the shoulders relax back and down, just letting some tension release from the body. And you can do this. You can allow tension and stress to release. You might feel your feet on the ground, feel the contact with the ground. Okay, so this is just a brief practice you can use for yourself. And so I'd like to just take us through very brief visualization practice together, and we're going to draw on these concepts. So if it's comfortable for you, I invite you to just gently close your eyes and just take any movements you might need to take in the chair, or if you're seated on the floor, so you can feel as comfortable as possible. If it's not comfortable to open the eyes, simply just gaze softly down towards the floor. And I invite you to bring to mind a competitive scenario that causes you some stress. It could be an imagined situation in the future, or maybe it was something from a recent past performance. And just imagining that scenario with all of your senses right now, noticing what you were seeing, hearing, feeling. Maybe there were tastes and smells associated with this experience. Noticing any feelings of stress or anxiety that arise right now. And now I invite you to visualize yourself in this stressful situation using this practice. You notice feelings of stress, and you simply note to yourself, oh, thank you, fear, for trying to protect me right now. Thank you. But I'm okay. I'm safe. I'll be okay. And then you take a deep breath or two, inhaling fully and exhaling slowly, allowing tension to release, relaxing any areas of habitual tension or tightness. And in this visualization, you notice yourself feeling more calm and centered. And then you move forward. Okay, and as you feel ready, let's bring this exercise to a close, and you can gently open the eyes. Okay, so this is a tool you can have in your toolbox. Moving forward, a couple other points I like to point out about this is that, so there's reappraisal in the sense that you can just kind of notice that extreme anxiety is your brain overreacting, and you can calm and relax the body. It's also helpful to remember that when you're doing great things, some level of discomfort is going to be inevitable, right? And it's better to reappraise that discomfort in a way that's helpful. So as I mentioned before, Arthur Ashe famously said that pressure is a privilege, right? When we feel pressure, our fear brain wants us to pull away, right? But really, you all are elite athletes, and you've worked so hard to be where you are, and so few people get to do this, right? And so if you look at pressure as an opportunity and a privilege, as cliche as that may sound, that's going to be a more helpful response. So something that I like to say to folks is to use self-talk like, I'm willing to experience discomfort at times. It's an admission ticket to get to feel the thrill of playing competitive sports. And I can stay true to my values even if I experience unpleasant feelings and thoughts. So a key concept here is that you don't need to fight against unpleasant feelings and thoughts. You can have those unpleasant feelings and thoughts and still stay true to your values. So let's say, for example, you value courage and you're feeling like you're kind of experiencing unpleasant feelings of tension or maybe some negative thoughts. You can still act with confidence with your body language, and you can still have a positive, encouraging voice in your mind, even if it kind of feels fake, to keep you in line with that. Okay, so relatedly, I'm going to talk about another part of the brain, which is called the default mode network. So it doesn't really matter the particular brain structures, but it's just important to understand that our brain has a network of regions that's basically responsible for constantly producing thoughts. So as you all know on the call, if you sort of sit down to try to just relax, oftentimes your brain is just spouting out thoughts all the time. And if your brain is doing that, that means you're normal. So just like the body secretes enzymes, the mind secretes thoughts. Okay. So, and I like to show this cartoon, mindful or mindful. So most of us, most of the time, have a mind like that on the left. Like the mind is just constantly spitting out thoughts. And what we'd like to have is kind of a more calm and peaceful mind, right? But something that's important to understand is that you can have unpleasant thoughts and unpleasant feelings as an athlete, and you don't have to believe your thoughts, okay? So you can have values as an athlete and set process goals that are consistent with those values, and you can still stay focused on those things, even though you might have negative thoughts pop up, like seemingly out of nowhere, like, oh, like, what if I blow this point? What is coach thinking? On and on and on. And so what I encourage athletes to do is to see their unpleasant thoughts and feelings like leaves on a stream. So if you think of your mind as kind of like a solid riverbank, watching the stream, and different sorts of leaves of all shapes and colors are just kind of floating by. And using an attitude of mindfulness, you can simply observe the ever-changing flow of thoughts and feelings. And remember that they really, a lot of the time, are not accurate, even most of the time. And you can just notice and say, oh, there's fear. Or, oh, there's like a negative image that just popped in. Okay, thoughts and feelings don't execute skills, right? They're just things that are coming up and they're always changing, right? And a lot of the time we kind of get hung up in our thoughts, and we think that our thoughts actually tell what's happening in the future. Like, let's say, you lose a point in tennis. You think like, oh man, like I'm probably just going to lose this whole set. And, what are people going to think of me? I really should be able to win this. And it's important to remember that, like we really don't know, like we don't know the future, but a lot of times our unpleasant feelings and thoughts about outcomes like start to feel extremely real, and they can take us away from our values. We can start anxiously trying to control the future. We can start talking to ourselves negatively. We can start moving away from what we really value most. And so there's a parable that I like to share to just illustrate this concept that, we just don't know. And our thoughts and judgments really, they're just thoughts and judgments, like they're not reality. And so the story goes that there's a farmer and his neighbor. And the farmer has a corral full of horses. And the neighbor comes by and says, wow, look how fortunate you are. You have all these beautiful horses. And the farmer says, we'll see. So a week goes by, and as it so happens, one of the people working on the farm left the gate open and the horses all ran away. And the neighbor comes by and says, oh, how unfortunate. All of your horses are gone. And the farmer says, we'll see. So the next day, the horses returned, and they had brought with them some wild horses as well from the countryside. And the neighbor says to the farmer, oh, how fortunate you are. Look at all of these more horses you have. And the farmer says, we'll see. And so some time goes by, and then the farmer's son decided to try and tame some of the wild horses. And so one day he was riding one of the wild horses, who became scared and threw him off to the ground. And the farmer's son broke his leg. And the neighbor says, oh, how unfortunate. Your son's broken his leg. What terrible luck. And the farmer says, we'll see. And later that month, some soldiers came through the village picking up young men to fight in the war. And the farmer's son was still recovering from his injury, so he was not selected to go fight in the war. And the neighbor said, how fortunate you are. Your son is able to stay home here with you on the farm. And the farmer says, we'll see. Okay, so the point of that story, again, is that we sometimes get pulled into thought forms, and we start to think that they are actually real when in fact they're just thoughts, okay? So, which brings us to another experiential practice of mindfulness. So being able to stay present in the moment underlies all aspects of great performance. And everything we're talking about today in some way ties into this basic underlying principle. Okay, so I invite, let's see, I'm just checking the time here. So we have a few minutes to go. So training the mind to be present, to notice thoughts, to notice feelings, and to come back into the moment is a mental skill that you can practice. And I also want to name that we all have the ability to be mindful and present. I'm sure everyone on this call can think of times when they were in a state of flow, where there was just a merging of what you were doing and your awareness, completely immersed in the moment. Or maybe if you can remember times in nature when you felt a sense of awe, a sense of presence. So we all have the seeds of mindfulness and presence within us, and we can nurture those seeds through mindfulness practice. And I'm going to share some resources that folks can use to practice mindfulness on a daily basis. But I invite everybody to engage in a very brief exercise. We're probably only going to do this for about 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. But again, I invite everyone to just take a comfortable posture as best you can. It's helpful when practicing mindfulness meditation to have the spine be tall. You might feel the crown of the head reaching up towards the sky as you relax the shoulders back and down. You might just rest the feet flat on the floor if that's available to you, letting the eyes close if that's comfortable for you, or choosing to leave the eyes open. And let's begin our practice with another consciously full breath. Inhaling and let the belly expand. And exhaling, breathing out slow, like through a straw. Releasing any areas of habitual tension or tightness. If the jaw is tight, you might open the mouth and just circle the jaw. Relaxing the corners of the eyes. Relaxing the space between the eyes. Relaxing any tension you may be holding in the abdomen. Just letting the breath flow in and out without effort. And see if you can rest your attention right now on sensations of breath. Noticing wherever you feel the breath most strongly, maybe in the abdomen as it rises and falls. Maybe you can notice the air moving in and out of the nose, cool as it flows in and warm as it flows out. Or maybe you just sense the whole body breathing. Keeping the attention on physical sensations of breath. Being aware that you're breathing in and aware that you're breathing out. And by now, the mind has probably wandered on to thoughts or distractions. And that's normal. Congratulate yourself for noticing that your mind has gone into thought forms about the future, the past. Just gently noting thinking, and return the attention to the breath. Thinking of the breath like an anchor. Paying attention to the breath, which is always with us, helps keep you present here right now in this moment. Each time you catch the mind wandering, going into thought forms like a virtual reality, that's an opportunity to congratulate yourself that you've noticed that, and to practice mindfulness by returning to the breath. And you might now widen the lens of the attention to include sounds that are happening right now. Close-in sounds and faraway sounds. See if you can open to sounds with the whole body, being open to receive the sound of these words. Or maybe you notice a certain quality of silence. And then lastly, widening the attention to include sensations of the whole body seated here. Maybe sensations of tingling or warmth or cool, pressure. Fully present right here, right now. You might note to yourself, I'm not coming from anywhere. I'm not on my way anywhere else. Just this moment. And as we start to bring our practice to a close, you might once more bring the mind back to the here and now. And as you feel ready, gently open the eyes. Okay. So mental skills, just like physical skills, are things that you can practice. So we know that the brain is malleable or plastic. You've probably heard the term neuroplasticity. So the more you practice certain skills like mindfulness meditation, which we just did, so training the mind to dwell in the present as opposed to getting lost in thought forms, is something you can do on a daily basis. So I recommend, I've listed a couple of meditation apps here. Insight Timer is free, something I really like. So setting aside some time to practice every day, I think can help cultivate that present moment focus, as well as just support your well-being, giving yourself a few minutes to just be present, given that everything you have on your plate as a student athlete. I also recommend in daily life, just doing informal mindfulness. So when you're washing the dishes, just wash the dishes. You know, when you're eating lunch, try to spend at least a minute, you know, just enjoying the process of doing that. And that's going to help you be able to stay more present. And I want to allow a couple minutes for questions, but other achievement strategies. So healthy habits, the healthier your habits, the easier it's going to be for you to stay in the process and to stay in the present and to access positive emotions, confidence, all those things that athletes are looking for. So things like eating healthy, making sure you're getting about 8 hours of sleep, being careful with smartphone overuse. So every time we grab at our phones and scroll, we're almost training this jittery, distracted mind, right? So it's not a diatribe against phones, but I suggest that people just try to be mindful. It's like, are you reaching for the phone because you're about to do something interesting and creative and fulfilling, or are you just kind of distracting yourself from things that are hard, right? So just practice some mindfulness around that. You know, taking time to rest and recover, right? And so mindfulness training is can be a useful tool for that as well. But I'll leave, you know, you have a spot on the worksheet there to maybe do some reflection around healthy habits that you might want to focus on. Okay, so I think we're about at the end of time, but Anthony, I would love to take any questions if we've had any in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a couple we can run through real quickly.
Okay.
First question being, it says, since outcome goals are what most people care about, how can I prioritize process goals and share that approach with those around me, whether it's teammates or coaches, you name it?
Yeah, that's like a really, really terrific question. And I think that's a challenge that is faced by many, many athletes when there's so much pressure on the outcome. So I definitely think that, you know, there's been a lot of research done. I think coming back to the science is one helpful way to do that. So we know from sports psychology research in all different forms supports that if you take a present moment focus and let go of the outcome, it really ultimately, paradoxically, can help the outcome, right? So yes, you want to set outcome goals, like you want to win tournaments, you want to, achieve certain benchmarks. But I think creating team cultures in which discussions about process goals become commonplace. I think even saying something like, hey coach, like I went to this webinar today and the sports psychologist was talking about process goals and how they can really help us perform better as a team. Like, I wonder if we could talk more about that. Maybe we can, as a team, come up with some different process goals or share that with each other. I think this could be really helpful. Or, hey coach, I just learned from the sports psychologist that setting process goals can be helpful. And I came up with these. I wonder if, maybe we could talk together, or maybe there are ways that you can support me in staying focused on this. Because I know if I stay present in the moment, it's going to maximize the likelihood that I'll perform well. Right. So I think that like process goals are not in opposition to outcome goals. They're really a way to just maximize the likelihood that you'll get to these outcomes, but in a way that's going to be effective. If everyone is sitting around like worrying about like, oh, we have to, control this thing out in the future, that's going to make people tense up and it's not actually going to help get you there. Right. Hopefully that's helpful. That's a great question.
Very well said. Next one, how can student athletes practice being present in daily life when we have so much to do?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. So I think two things. So going back to what I was mentioning earlier, really any activity you're doing is a chance to practice presence. So there's all this messaging that we're good multitaskers, but we're actually really not. Like, all the research suggests that when we multitask, even if you're sitting in class and you're like worrying about trying to analyze something else you have to do later, you're less effective in all of those domains. So you can think of like a computer that has, when you have a bunch of tabs open and a bunch of applications open, it drains your battery, right? It slows the computer down. So if you're sitting in class trying to take notes, just sit in class and take notes. Like, don't have other things open, chats, this and that. Like, give yourself that chance to just try to fully immerse yourself in what you're doing. Or if you're cooking a meal, right, that's a great opportunity to really appreciate the sensory experience of doing that, And the other thing I would say is that throughout the day, there actually are little pauses in between events. So practice is over, let's say you're taking a short walk somewhere. That's a time to really just enjoy walking, feel your feet on the ground, just notice sensations of breathing, notice the beautiful scenes around you. Just by opening your eyes, you can see trees and the sky and all these things. And just allowing yourself that space in the in-between to be present versus cluttering it up with your phone or planning the next thing, right? Just bringing your mind back to the present. And those little micro moments add up over the course of time.
Very good. One final one. How will I know if, or I guess when, it's time to meet one-on-one with a sports psychologist?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think, meeting with a sports psychologist, I think anytime is a good time. So let's say you just want to have a sounding board and build some skills that maybe you don't have. Maybe during today's talk, you've heard of some things maybe for the first time, or things that you've tried to do and maybe you want to do more of. That's a great time to meet with a sports psychologist. So think about, like, let's say you're doing well, but you just want to enhance, right? So sports psychologists are ready to go with a lot of different tools in their toolbox to help you with that. And then also maybe you notice that you're feeling stressed or you're feeling overwhelmed, right? With a lot of college students, a lot of college student athletes do feel that way. And I think that becomes normalized sometimes, that, you have so much on your plate. It's just kind of the status quo to feel stressed and overwhelmed and anxious. But sports psychologists can really provide you with really valuable support to try to manage those feelings and to take care of yourself.
Well said. Well, that concludes in terms of the Q&A session. If you all have any final questions, feel free to jot them in there. But if that's not the case, I think we'll go ahead and start closing out in terms of I guess finalizing our first webinar. And thank you, Carly, for all of this. Really, really great stuff. For those of you who joined us, thank you. For those of you who are watching this at a later time, I hope it goes well. And if you have any questions, I just sent my email into the chat. I'll make sure those of you who are watching the recording also have access to my email with any questions, or if you'd like to get in touch with Carly, we can absolutely facilitate that. Or if you'd like to meet with her, all the better. So thank you all for those of you who I guess participated, who are here. And if you don't mind, we have a quick 4-question survey at the end of it, just to get a little feedback on what you like, what you didn't like. If it was helpful, maybe I guess content you desired at a later date for next month's or the following month, whatever that might look like. So thank you again, Carly. I'll let you kind of wrap things up, but I at least wanted to extend my gratitude to all of those out there, and you as well, Carly.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a pleasure to be here with you all. And thank you, Anthony. And yeah, if you'd like to follow up with me about anything, don't hesitate to reach out or reach out to Anthony and he can assist with that. Yes, and I think these are all strategies that you can start using today. And just being on this call and learning about these strategies is really such a powerful step in terms of your mental game and supporting your well-being. So I wish everyone all the very best, and don't hesitate to reach out.
Well said. All right, everyone. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.